All right, we got the senator. Senator Blount, you there, sir?
I am. I'm sorry for the technical difficulties.
Oh, no problem whatsoever. So you guys been in session now for a little while, about a week. What's on your radar this year?
Well, things are moving in a hurry. You know, we've only been in session since last Tuesday, and the first deadline is the day after tomorrow. So things are moving quickly. I would say there are a lot of ambitious plans this session. Some of them good, some of them not so good, in my opinion. But things are going to get moving. I think this week we saw on Friday, House released a plan to eliminate the income tax. We've still got hopefully Medicaid to deal with, TANF to deal with, public education to deal with. So it's going to be a busy session.
What do you think about this proposal from the House to eliminate the income tax, phase that in over 10 years? We've been talking about that this morning. You're aware that Representative Trey Lamar filed that bill, HB 1. Speaker of the House Jason White, also a proponent. What are your thoughts, Senator?
I think we all know that since COVID and under the Biden administration with ARPA and the Infrastructure Act, that the state has seen an unprecedented amount of federal spending, and that money's going away. And revenue in the state is declining. Revenue in just about every state in the country is declining now that COVID and those federal programs have phased out. And I think it is irresponsible in the long-term interest of the state to eliminate 1/3 of the state budget. It's a little more than $2 billion a year, the income tax. And we've got needs in this state with infrastructure. We've got needs in the retirement system. We know that one-time federal money is going away, and I don't think we need to eliminate the income tax.
Okay. So have you, as the state economist, or have you been apprised from the state economist of any sort of longer-term projections, any pro formas that would reflect what you're talking about specifically?
Well, in terms of the revenue decline for this year, the most recent report from the budget office shows that we're down about $100 million,
yep,
or a little less than 3% from where we were last year. This is what every state is seeing right now. And so we need to be cautious. I mean, the previous governor, Phil Blount, twice was forced to make mid-year budget cuts when money didn't come in. The Republican governor before that, Haley Barbour, twice was forced to make mid-year budget cuts when the money didn't come in. The money that's in the bank right now is one-time surplus money that was driven in large part by federal spending. We need to spend that on one-time uses, and we've done that in a bipartisan way on infrastructure and state parks and other things. But to eliminate 1/3 of the budget it's not what we ought to do, in my opinion. I think we need to, particularly the sales tax. If we're going to have a tax cut, it ought to be the grocery tax. But if I think about the folks I represent in South Hinds County and the Terry area, if you drive back and forth to work 40, 50 miles round trip, and the state's now going to ask you to pay more for your gas, they're going to increase your sales taxes when you buy things that aren't groceries, and you're going to get an income tax, but you're not paying that much money in income tax anyway if you're retired or making $40,000 or $50,000 a year. It's not what we need to do. We need to deal with infrastructure because we're going to have to pay for this ourselves now. The federal government's not doing that anymore. We need to deal with the retirement system because we've got about a $25 billion unfunded liability there, and we all agree that we need a new tier, a new benefit structure for new hires, but that by itself is not going to solve the problem with the retirement system. It is going to take money, and that's what we need to be focused on.
I got you. So do you think that the state highway fund needs more money? Do you think we need more funds into the Department of Transportation to handle our capacity and maintenance needs? I'm sure
Yes.
You've seen that Commissioner Willie Simmons, the Executive Director, Brad White, the other commissioners have all been lobbying for this.
Yes, I think we do.
Okay. So the 5%, I guess I'm confused because you seem to indicate that you oppose the 5% sales tax on fuel, which would in fact add, it's estimated, about $400 million a year to the state highway fund. but you say that we need more money to the state highway fund. So where would we get that?
The income tax.
Okay, so
the income tax would help. The income tax would help with that. We're gonna if the legislature went home today, we would see $184 million in new tax cuts go into effect this year, because the tax cuts we've already passed haven't even fully taken effect yet.
Well, that is correct. And by the way, the estimates, according to I'm looking at the Department of Revenue's recent report. I'm sure you've seen it from December. What I'm looking at reflects that we're $80 million below estimate. For the month, it was $100 million, but fiscal year to date, we're $80 million. That's largely due to the decline in corporate C-Corp income taxes. I think is a function of corporations taking advantage of the immediate expensing provisions we lined up with the federal government on and recently passed into law.
Well, it just seems to me that the economy is slowing down. Things, the federal money is not coming, and the prudent thing to do is wait and not increase taxes. I say that I want to tax vaping products like cigarettes, but other than that, we don't need to increase taxes, and we need to wait and meet these obligations before we try to digest what has just happened with all this federal spending that's come to us in the last 2 or 3 years.
Gotcha. All right, so I'll put you down as a nay on this plan. You want to keep taxes where they are, or would you be in favor of raising income taxes?
I would not be in favor of raising income taxes. I would be in favor of taxing vaping products, and that's it. But let me say this:
okay.
When the Republicans took over the House a few years ago, they passed a rule which doesn't really work, but I think in theory it's a correct rule.
Okay.
That says if you're going to increase spending, you have to show where the money's going to come from.
Mm-hmm.
Fair enough. Well, the flip side of a rule like that would be if you're going to cut taxes, you need to show where the cut's going to come from, because you just can't magically say without a fiscal note or a report from state economists or anything that everything's going to be fine and growth's going to take care of everything.
Yeah.
If you want to cut revenue, fine. Show me where your cut's going to be. Show me what in the state budget, in the legislative budget recommendation that came out in December, are you going to cut education? Are you going to cut highways? Are you going to cut state parks, criminal justice? You want to reduce the budget? Show me where your cut's going to be. That's what we ought to do. And that everybody wants to pay less taxes, but these services that people rely on are going to increasingly be borne by the state, and we've got bills to pay, and we got a retirement system to shore up, and that's what we ought to do.
So you're aware that the current budget, if revenues come in as planned and spending is level with what budgeted, that we would generate a significant surplus. Do you think any of that, because I don't find this, is any of that a function of supplemental COVID money this year coming into the state?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I haven't seen it, but I think a lot of that is a 98% rule, which is a prudent thing to do. Spend 98% of your projected revenue. And then we do have a lot of money in the bank, and that's true.
Yeah.
But all the work that was done in every city and county in this state over the last few years for important infrastructure projects was paid for with federal money.
Right.
And in a couple of years, that money's not going to be there.
Yeah.
And people are going to come to the state and want to, they want to deal with drainage issues and street issues and all the other things that every member of the legislature got for his or her district. That's going to become a state responsibility. And so we need to be ready for that. And then we need to begin to pay down the unfunded liability in the retirement system. And we need to also do what I think the number one priority for the Mississippi Economic Council is we need to dramatically increase our funding for workforce training.
Okay. You got to go? You can hang around with us.
I can do another segment.
Okay, great. We got Senator David Blount on the line with us. He chairs the Senate Gaming Committee. Want to talk about mobile sports betting and a proposal you have about our statues in Washington, D.C. We're coming right back. Studio, Senator David Blount is our guest. So, Senator, just looking at the official document published by the Legislative Budget Office, it does reflect that if we were to produce revenue consistent with the sine-die projection, we generate roughly a $600 million surplus this year. And, of course, we already have $2.5 billion in the various funds and reserves, if you will.
Right.
Do you not feel like we should provide some form of tax relief to the taxpayers, given that we're able to produce surpluses, or would you prefer to see us appropriate that money and spend it on other programs and in other ways?
I think it's one-time money. It should be spent on one-time uses. I would first.
But I don't mean to interrupt you, but it's not. It's not one-time money, right? Because you just confirmed we're not receiving in this fiscal year any outsized supplemental augmented revenues from the federal government.
I'm sorry, I thought you asked me about the money in the bank.
No, I apologize. I'm talking about the surplus this year, the surplus we're generating this year. I'm looking more at the income side of the equation than the balance sheet side. I'm talking about the surplus.
Well, we should appropriate 98% of whatever the revenue is for the upcoming year.
Okay.
And if we don't appropriate 98%, the purpose, we need to have a reserve fund, obviously, and that's why it's prudent to only appropriate 98% of the money. But there's a lot of needs out there that if we're not appropriating money, again, I go back to workforce training. We had a very impressive meeting with Hines Community College, and I'm sure this is true at community colleges across the state. They have programs that can put people in the high-paying jobs. I'm not talking about a traditional AA program, job training programs where they cannot hire staff because folks can make more money in the private sector, and they don't have some of the equipment necessary to provide the training that they need because they haven't been funded to the way they need to be funded for workforce training. We should do that. We should have maximized our community college workforce training funding, and if we've got extra money, that's a good thing to do with it.
Right. I'm all for that, but we also need job creation. We got to have the jobs for these highly trained people to work, and right now, as you know, many of them leave the state before the ink's dry on their diploma. And we're funding that. We're essentially subsidizing the other states. I would argue that this is a way to attract new capital investment and business expansion into the state to create those jobs that these highly trained and skilled people could work with higher incomes.
I think we've got a very low workforce participation rate, and the way to raise that rate is to increase the skills of our people who live here.
Okay.
And that's what our community colleges are for.
Got a question for you about the workforce participation rate. Are you familiar with how that's calculated?
I think it's all the people who are alive of working age.
Right. It's everybody that's older than 18.
Well,
that are alive.
Of working age, yes.
No.
And so, obviously, you have people.
I'm not of working age. If I quit today, I'd be considered not participating in the labor force. That's how it's calculated. And I don't need to work. I got plenty of money. But hey, let me ask you this. Have you ever been called by the Bureau of Labor Statistics?
No, I haven't.
Do you know anybody that's ever been called?
No one's ever said that to me.
Right. I would challenge you to ask that question on the floor of the Mississippi State Senate. I can tell you what the answer is going to be because I've asked this in numerous speaking engagements. Nobody will raise their hand. I don't know how the BLS comes up with this number. I've yet to find a person who's ever been called.
Well, and I'm sure it's an imperfect measurement, and I'm sure you're right. But I also think if I ask anybody up here that says, do we have enough people working in this state, the answer is going to be no.
Have you ever asked any of those people why they're not working?
I think there are different reasons. I think they don't have skills. I think some don't have, well, I don't need to get into that.
I got you. That's fair enough.
I think giving people skills to make a good income is what our community colleges can do, and if we gave them more money, they could do more of it.
I got you. All right, so what about mobile sports betting? You know, that got passed in the House last year. It didn't get anywhere, and your committee in the Senate. Do you think that's coming up again, and how do you stand on that?
I'm where I am last year on that. I don't know if there will be a Senate bill. I don't remember if we had a Senate bill, but we certainly got a bill from the House. It did pass last year. So if they send us a bill, we'll look at it.
Okay.
I think the issues are sort of as they have been, that some casinos are for it and some casinos are against it.
Okay.
I have always seen the gaming industry in the state, the reason we have gaming in the state is for tourism, to bring new people to the state, to encourage investment in the form of hotels and amenities and things like, to grow the economy of the state, and to support the jobs, the tens of thousands of people who work in these jobs, either directly or indirectly, and all of that's a good thing, and I want to support that, and I don't want to do anything to endanger that.
Okay.
Mobile sports betting doesn't do any of that. Mobile sports betting does not drive tourism. It does not drive any economic investment in our state. And casinos have different opinions about whether or not it is good for jobs and people who work in this industry. So that may change this year, but if we get a bill in the Senate, I'm going to be looking at it. The thing I am going to be focused on in the Gaming Committee is working with our Secretary of State and dealing with the tidelands issues that have arisen on the Gulf Coast. I think it's important that one thing Mississippi's done right is keep our gaming laws and regulations consistent, regardless of who the governor is or who's on the Gaming Commission or who's in the legislature. The rules have been consistent, and that's what we need to encourage further investment on the Gulf Coast. There have been some developments on the commission side and in the courts that throw that into question. So we're going to be looking at that this year on the Senate side.
Okay. What about, let's turn our attention to, I believe, a bill, if I'm not mistaken, you're the principal author of, right? And that's to change who represents us in Statuary Hall in the Capitol. Yes, I did do that. You may know that every state in the country has 2 statues in Statuary Hall. Mississippi's 2 statues are Jefferson Davis and J.Z. George. I just think if you asked anybody in Mississippi who are the 2 greatest Mississippians our state has produced, that they would not say Jefferson Davis and J.Z. George. So this is something that I think the public needs to weigh in on, and the model for that legislation is what we did with the state flag. The legislature is not going to decide. I'm not going to decide. Let's involve the public. Let's put a commission out there. Let's hear what people have to say and find out who are the best 2 representatives of our state. Arkansas recently changed theirs from 2 people I'd never heard of and replaced them with Daisy Bates and Johnny Cash. And I think that sounds pretty good. And we've got a lot of great people in this state. A lot of talented folks over the years, and we need to identify those 2 people because I think we can do better than Jefferson Davis and J.Z. George. I see. Okay. What about something else that's going to be coming up, certainly on the House side for sure, is enhancing the school choice provisions in the state. Where do you stand on what's being talked about there? I'm not really clear on what they have in mind, but I think about my district. If I have a child, a family who lives in South Jackson, and that child wants to go to Clinton or Madison Central or Northwest Rankin, are they going to be able to go? Yeah. And if the answer is yes, we need to think through that from what's impact on JPS, but also what impact it may have on Northwest Rankin or Madison Central or Clinton. But if the answer is no, then I don't really know what we're talking about. Okay. I mean, if the theory is that a home district of a child cannot retain that child, but the receiving district has to accept that child, and again, thinking about that family in South Jackson that I represent, if that's an empty promise, and we pass that bill, and that child wants to go to Clinton, say, or Northwest Rankin, and they say, well, I'm sorry, Johnny, we just don't have room for you. We're full up here. We got more than we can handle. Then I don't really know what we've accomplished. I also am concerned that if districts can make up their own rules about who they take and who they don't take, that you're going to see the transfer portal in high school sports. So I just want to see specifically what's being proposed, and I want to make sure that if we say we're doing something, we're really doing it. Okay. But it sounds like you could be in favor of some sort of reasonable public-to-public choice option. Well, certainly I want to say from the beginning that if we're talking about special needs students who have a legitimate special need and can go to a school that can service that need, absolutely we need to do that. But we have that now, right? If there is the home district still has to let that student go. So if they do not, then that student cannot go. I got you. But if there's a program for your child's specific disability at the neighboring district, then by all means you should be able to access that program. Okay, I'm fine with that. But I've heard different things as it relates to school choice, and if that child in the South Jackson cannot go to a different school because the neighboring school district can say,
we're not going to take you, or we're not going to take you unless you rushed for 500 yards last year, or whatever their category is, then
Gotcha.
I just think it's an empty promise.
Okay. Well, I'm sure we'll be seeing what develops there and hope to talk to you again soon about that. Senator David Blount, thanks for coming on.
Happy to be with you. Thank you.
You got it. We're coming right back, folks, in the Element Wealth studio.